Not all beauty comes with a price tag. Sometimes it's handmade quietly at a kitchen table after long shifts and tired nights. They mocked her for being simple, yet her simplicity was her strength. This is a story about a heart that stitched its own destiny. There are moments at the end of a long day when the world feels quiet, as if it is taking a slow breath. The rooftop restaurant sat high above the city lights, with music thinning as the dinner crowd disappeared into hallways and elevators. The last candles on the tables flickered like tiny flames giving their final effort before going out. And in that gentle hush, Lila Reyes moved with steady hands and calm steps, her shoulders a little tired but her face composed. She finished wiping down the polished wood surface of the final table. Her black and white uniform blended into the place so well she almost felt invisible, and maybe that had become normal. The uniform kept her quiet, professional, unnoticed, but under it she existed as someone with her own colors, her own designs, her own way of seeing the world. She walked to the waiter's station and slid her time card into the clock. A soft beep marked the end of her shift. The other servers chatted in small, exhausted bursts about tips and customers, but Lila listened more than she spoke. She had learned long ago that not everyone needed to hear her voice to understand she was present. Her work had always been precise, respectful, and patient. And tonight was just another night. Long hours, steady hands, and a quiet walk home after. The staff hallway was narrow and warm, the lockers lined up with chipped paint. Lila opened hers, pulling out a folded cotton dress wrapped in careful tissue paper. She laid her uniform shirt inside and stepped out of the black slacks she wore every day. The cotton dress felt like a breath of cool air against her skin. It was simple. Soft cream fabric shaped gently at the waist, the neckline modest, the hem falling just below her knees. But what made the dress different were the vines embroidered along the fabric, curling like growing life from the bottom hem upward. The stitches were tiny and steady, threads layered in greens and soft browns, each leaf shaped with care. This was not a dress bought from a store or ordered from a website. It was the only dress she owned that made her feel like herself. She smoothed the hem with her palms and checked her reflection in the slightly dented metal door of the locker. The reflection wasn't glamorous, but it was true. A quiet face, warm eyes, a steady presence. She tucked a loose piece of hair behind her ear and exhaled slowly. Maybe she was tired, but she was still whole. The night air outside the restaurant was cool, drifting up from the city below. Cars pulled up under the tall awning, headlights cutting across the stone. At the edge of the walkway stood Camille Hart, like she had been placed there deliberately, the way one might set down a gleaming object to be admired. Tall, perfect posture, flawless soft beige coat draped around her shoulders, long hair that moved like something practiced. She did not wait like a regular person waited for a car. She posed while waiting. Even her expression rested in a soft smirk that suggested she lived in a different world entirely. Camille laughed lightly at something on her phone, then lifted her head just long enough to notice Lila walking past. Lila didn't look at her directly. She had no reason to. She was simply passing by, heading for the crosswalk, heading home. But Camille's eyes narrowed with a sort of amused curiosity, like she found something unexpected to comment on. Her voice floated out, light, but cutting in the way only certain people manage. "Oh, did you DIY that?" She let her gaze travel slowly over the embroidered vines. "That's adorable." There was no warmth in the word adorable. It was the kind of tone that turned sweetness into something small. A few people standing nearby heard it. Someone snickered quietly. Another shifted awkwardly, unsure how to respond. Lila did not freeze. She did not break. Her face did not change because she had been spoken to like this before in many forms from many mouths. She simply nodded once, her expression calm and polite, and kept walking. The soft tap of her shoes touched the pavement, steady as always, but even a steady heart can feel heavy in moments like that. She could feel the sting somewhere deep, not because of the insult itself, but because of what it represented. The assumption that she was small, unimportant, easy to dismiss. She carried that weight as she crossed the street, though her posture never faltered. Camille was still laughing a little to herself when the door behind her opened. Adrian Vale stepped out, pausing in the doorway as if something in the scene didn't sit quite right. He had the kind of presence that usually filled a room without trying, but right now his attention was focused on the fading silhouette of the young woman walking away. He had seen the dress, not casually, not like someone glancing at clothing. His eyes had traced the stitching, the careful spacing, the way the leaves curved naturally. The kind of detail that could only come from hands that knew fabric intimately. It was not something a hobbyist stitched in free moments. It was design. It was voice. It was identity expressed in thread. He said nothing to Camille then. No correction. No reaction. He simply took in the contrast between what was seen and what was overlooked. Camille noticed his silence and lifted her chin, lightly annoyed that her comment went unacknowledged. She touched his arm and smiled, trying to recenter his attention on herself. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. Something had shifted so slight that only someone watching closely would notice. Camille's car arrived. They got in. The doors closed. The city swallowed the moment. Lila continued walking toward the bus stop, shoulders square, hands steady, the weight of the evening sitting quietly inside her. But that day was not the end of something, it was the beginning. Morning light always has a different quality than evening light. It lands softly without hurry, touching buildings and streets like it is remembering them. Adrian Vale sat in a quiet, glass-walled boardroom overlooking the city. The skyline stretched out before him like something he had conquered long ago, but today his attention was not steady. Files and portfolios lay open across the polished table. Fabric samples, color palettes, sketches from high-end designers, each expensive, sharpened, refined. Everything here was professional, perfect, proven, yet it all felt empty. Members of his team spoke in calm, confident voices, presenting designer after designer for the upcoming charity gala. They showed the latest collections predicting media response, outlining metrics and brand alignment. It was a world of polish, a world of correct choices. Adrian listened, but something in him was quieting rather than engaging. He leaned back slightly and let his fingers brush over the corner of a photo one of the assistants had placed near him. It showed sleek dresses with bold geometric patterns, technically impressive, but so calculated. It was design meant to impress, not speak. He remembered the dress from the night before. The vines, the small leaves, the softness of it, not made to be seen yet impossible to ignore if one looked closely. It had been personal, real. A whisper rather than a shout. One of the board members noticed his distance and asked softly if something was on his mind. Adrian didn't respond right away. He simply closed the folder in front of him and let his gaze drift toward the city again as if something out there held the answer. He wasn't thinking of business strategy. He was thinking of intention, the difference between someone who creates to impress and someone who creates because it is part of who they are. Someone on the team started to say something about familiarity and predictability being safe choices, safe designs, safe impressions. Adrian heard the words, but they felt hollow. He had built everything in his life on risk. His entire business empire existed because he had dared to choose what others overlooked. He tapped his fingers on the table once, slowly. A quiet decision forming. "We're missing something," he said finally, his voice calm but sure. "We're choosing from what is expected." The team exchanged glances. They knew that tone. When Adrian spoke like that, it meant direction was about to change. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The meeting ended not with loud debate, but with a kind of thoughtful uncertainty. Something new was coming, though no one yet understood what form it would take. At the restaurant that afternoon, Lila moved through her shifts as she always did. Steady, quiet, willing. The dining room filled with lunchtime light, silverware softly clinking, wine glasses catching reflections. She tied her hair back and carried plates to tables, refilled water, smiled kindly at tired business people, traveling couples and mothers with restless children. She was present, but her mind walked elsewhere, tracing stitching patterns, colors, fabric textures. Her creativity lived with her always, even while she worked. She did not know that this would be the last day she moved through this building as if she were invisible. Near the start of the afternoon lull, her manager, a man who rarely changed expression, approached her with a slip of paper in his hand. He looked almost uncertain, which surprised her. Managers rarely showed uncertainty. He spoke quietly, telling her that someone had requested to meet her. Not a customer, not a complaint, a private appointment. The name was written clearly. Adrian Vale. Her heart didn't race, but something inside took a slow step forward. She didn't ask why. She didn't speculate. She simply nodded and continued working until her break. When the time came, she changed again, not into her embroidered dress, but into a clean blouse and jeans, worn but neat. She smoothed the material over her sides the same way she had smoothed the hem of the dress the night before, grounding herself. Walking into Adrian's office was like stepping into another world. The room was quiet, large, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city feel closer than it ever did from the street. Light moved across glass, steel, and polished stone. But what struck her most was the calm, the kind of quiet that didn't feel cold. Adrian stood when she entered. He wasn't dressed to impress in the way some wealthy men were. His clothing was simple, tailored, comfortable, expensive only in the way simplicity can be when it's chosen intentionally. There was no arrogance in his posture, only attention. He invited her to sit. She sat with quiet posture, hands folded lightly in her lap. He didn't begin with business language. He didn't speak like someone offering charity or praise. He simply asked gently if she had made the dress she was wearing outside the restaurant the night before. She nodded once. He asked how long she had been sewing. She told him about years, learning from books, from experimentation, from mistakes. She told him about how fabric felt like speaking. Her voice was soft but clear. He listened as though every word mattered. He asked where she worked. She told him. Her small apartment, sewing table near a window, one machine that sometimes jammed if she wasn't careful. She said it without apology. She did not ask for pity. It was simply her truth, and that was what moved him. There are people who create because they want recognition, and there are people who create because the act itself is part of their breathing. He saw immediately which one she was. He leaned back slightly. The space between them held a quiet shift. He told her about the Gala, the biggest event his company hosted each year, a fundraiser meant to highlight new possibilities, not just display wealth. He told her how every designer presented work that felt beautiful but predictable, technically flawless, emotionally hollow. He told her he wanted something else this year, something honest, something with soul, something like the dress she made. The room felt still. Lila did not respond quickly. She allowed the words to settle, allowed herself to understand the invitation being placed before her. It was large, almost too large, but she did not allow fear to speak first. Then the door opened. Camille entered. Her steps were smooth, but her eyes immediately locked on Lila, confusion turning quickly to disbelief. She laughed once, not loudly, just a soft exhale that carried judgment. She touched Adrian's shoulder lightly, as if claiming him. Then she commented with the same tone she had used the night before, about how cute Lila's sewing hobby must be. Amateur, sweet, small. Her smile was soft, painted, dismissive. The room could have bent under the weight of that tone, but Adrian did not turn toward Camille. He did not respond to her comment. He looked only at Lila. His voice was steady. "I would like you to design the featured collection for the Gala." The words landed with quiet force. Camille's expression shifted sharply, surprise breaking through her composure. Her gaze moved quickly between the two of them, trying to find a place where her influence still held. Lila inhaled slowly, the breath deep and grounding. She did not look at Camille. She did not look down. She met Adrian's eyes. She said she would do it, not with excitement, not with fear, but with calm certainty, as though she had known this path existed before it revealed itself. Adrian nodded. Camille stood very still. The city stretched outside the window, unchanged. But everything had changed. The studio space Adrian arranged for her wasn't luxurious. It wasn't meant to overwhelm. It was simply a former storage room on one of the unused levels of his company building. Tall windows, quiet, open floor. A long wooden table, good lighting, a sewing machine that didn't sputter. For the first time, Lila had enough room to spread her patterns without needing to clear the dinner table each night. She stood there on the first morning, hands resting on the table, feeling the size of the space. It was not the room that made her emotional. It was what the room represented. A door she had always suspected existed now opened. She did not rush. She prepared, She bought fabric with careful consideration, running her fingers over each material until she felt the one that breathed. She sketched without hesitation, lines flowing as if they already lived inside her and simply needed a surface to rest on. The designs came from memory and feeling, from years of quiet observation, soft shapes, natural curves, embroidery that grew like vines along the edges and sleeves, subtle yet unmistakably alive. She worked long hours, sometimes past midnight, losing count of time. Thread pooled like tiny rivers across the table. She pinned, stitched, pressed, adjusted. Her hands sometimes trembled with exhaustion, but her expression remained steady, grounded. She was not trying to prove anything to anyone. She was simply creating what she had always held inside, and with each piece she finished, she stood and looked at it not with pride, but with recognition. This was her voice. Word of a new designer circulated quietly through the company and then beyond. Some dismissed it immediately. A server turned seamstress, surely a passing curiosity. Others felt a flicker of interest. Something about the way Adrian spoke, calm, certain, made people pause. Camille watched the progression from a distance at first. She saw sketches pinned across mood boards. She saw Adrian observing the work with thoughtful attention. Something inside her tightened, not jealousy exactly, but fear of becoming background. She had always been the person admired, seen, praised. She had never had to share the spotlight, especially not with someone who didn't seek it. Each time she passed the studio door, she paused, just long enough to look, just long enough to feel something she couldn't name. But she never stepped inside. The night of the gala arrived with all the elegance the city was known for. The venue glowed with warm lights, glass chandeliers reflecting softly against marble floors. Guests arrived in sleek cars, escorted inside with flashes of cameras and murmured excitement. The event was meant to support community arts and youth programs, but in truth, most people came to be seen. Backstage, models stood in a line, wearing the collection Lila had made. The dresses moved like they breathed, the embroidery catching the light in quiet ways, never loud, always present. There was something alive about them. Not trendy, not designed to shock, but deeply human. Stylists buzzed, adjusting hems and smoothing hair. Photographers stood ready to capture every moment the instant the runway lit up. Lila stood slightly off to the side, hands gently clasped together. Her heart beat steady, not frantic. She was not performing. She was witnessing the moment she had worked for. The moment everything would be seen clearly or not at all. The runway lights rose. The first model stepped forward, and a hush moved through the room. The designs flowed like movement itself. The audience leaned in without realizing they had done so. There was no heavy makeup, no sharp edges, no forced boldness, just softness that felt strong. Beauty that didn't need to announce itself. People whispered to each other, quietly, urgently, the kind of whisper reserved for something surprising. A well-known fashion critic lowered her pen, watching the garments with real attention. A magazine editor's mouth fell slightly open. A photographer paused, as though not wanting to miss the moment, yet needing to breathe it in first. The show continued, each piece unfolding like a story told without words. And backstage, Lila's eyes softened. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply recognized herself. There, in every stitch. Then came the moment. Lila did not expect the final model. Stepped onto the runway. It was Camille, styled in one of Lila's signature dresses, not by choice, but by design. The styling team had selected the strongest piece for the highest impact appearance, unaware of the history between the two women. The dress fit Camille beautifully, a soft cream fabric similar to Lila's own, but cut with evening grace, vines embroidered across the bodice and flowing down the skirt like growing light. It was elegance shaped from humility, power shaped from gentleness. The cameras exploded in flashes. Voices rose in admiration. People whispered the designer's name before it was even announced. Camille felt the shift instantly. The attention was not on her. It was on the dress. She stood in the center of the runway, understanding the irony with slow realization. The very thing she mocked now made her radiant. She walked the runway anyway, posture perfect, expression calm. But something had softened behind her eyes, not humiliation exactly, but recognition. She stepped off stage and stopped in front of Lila. Their eyes met. No, Apology was spoken, no forgiveness was requested. But something passed between them, understanding. A quiet acknowledgement of what had been ignored and what had now become undeniable. The announcer's voice rose over the speakers, clear and echoing. Featured designer. Lila Reyes. The room erupted into applause, not polite, not rehearsed. Real. Lila stepped forward, not grandly, not dramatically. Just herself, simple, certain. The applause felt like light landing gently on the surface of still water. No cheering. No shouting. Just recognition. Adrian stood beside the stage watching her, a calm pride settling in his expression. Not as someone who made her, not as someone claiming credit, but as someone who had simply seen her clearly before the world did. Lila looked out at the audience. Her hands remained steady. All her life she had been quiet. But her work had spoken now, and it had spoken with strength. She didn't need to say a word. She was seen. She was known. She was enough. And that is how a moment of cruelty turned into a moment of victory. A dress once mocked became the design everyone admired. Lila didn't fight back with anger, she fought back with skill, patience, and grace. 'Cause real worth doesn't need to shout. It simply waits, and shines when the time is right. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated or judged too quickly? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next story.